Cherki was wonderful as City in the end comfortably beat Sunderland, but there was a particular moment in the match that, but for Cherki's intervention, the match may well have gone away from City in that second half in a similar fashion to that Leeds and Fulham game. We're going to be analysing the match today through the use of stills and my tactics board with a focus on, of course, the goals and Cherki's wonderful man of the match performance. Sunderland this season haven't exclusively been using a back five. Sometimes they go more for a 4-4-2. And I think that Pep was a little bit caught off guard as to how defensive Sunderland were willing to be straight away from the off. They just went with a low block 5-4-1 for the most part. Very little pressing intensity in that first half. When they did occasionally get spells of possession in the game, what would happen is Traore would tuck in almost as like a right central midfielder or sometimes as a number 10 with Xhaka and Siddiqui as the pivot players. The right wing back pushed up to right wing. The whole back five then pushes across to form a back four. Then you have this situation. I don't think that Guardiola was necessarily expecting them to be as defensive as they were straight from the off. I'll repeat that if you've watched Sunderland this season, that's not necessarily how they have played for all of their games against the better sides. So initially, I thought it was just going to be Núñez pushing up with double overlapping fullbacks of Núñez and O'Reilly, Cherki essentially being played as a false winger, and then Bernardo and Foden dropping deep, assisting in build-up in case Sunderland did want to press us. But they didn't really want to do that, and what we actually saw was it was essentially Núñez was played as a right centre-back in those opening moments, and it was Bernardo who simply swapped with Cherki. So Bernardo was that width hold out on the right that enabled Cherki to go into the centre. As the match progressed and as it became obvious that Sunderland were just going to sit back defensively, it made very little sense at that point to have three centre-backs on the pitch. You might as well have one of them advance, and that's what Núñez did. So many Sunderland bodies in the box. In fact, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 actually in the box, 2 just outside it, so only one player not here, so crosses are always intercepted. It's going to take something like a moment of magic or a mistake or a little bit of good fortune in order to break down a side like Sunderland, who for 30 minutes were fantastic in the match defensively for the vast majority of that first half. Even though City scored 2 goals, Sunderland were very defensively organised and City was struggling to break them down, and we had our best low block players on the pitch as well, so it wasn't going that well for City. However, if you defend like this and you have all of these bodies in the box like this, before we get onto that, actually, here was one of those moments of magic through Núñez and Cherki. So Núñez pushing up, as I said before, when it became apparent that he didn't need to stay as a right centre-back anymore. He links up wonderfully well with Cherki. Here's one of those moments of magic by Cherki. Fantastic little ball, and Núñez unfortunately gets too much on the cross. And here is Núñez in that more right-wing area, and this is alluding to something that we saw throughout the game. Players more than happy to create spontaneity. So Doku, technically your left attacking midfielder, just popping up here near the right wing, because why not? Cherki likewise going more to the centre, and he was all over the pitch, was Cherki, given like full freedom. Here is the first goal. Now there is good fortune about the goal because it takes a deflection that goes in. However, if you are backing off and you are not closing down the shooter quickly enough because you are from such a deep starting point, then you're almost shooting yourselves in the foot to a degree, and you're sort of losing the excuse of, oh, well, it was just a bit of good fortune. Doku down that left flank, he's sucked in 2 players here, and we know that Ruben Diaz is going to be the goal scorer, but look at how much space there is for City's players on the edge of the box because Sunderland are camped in right now. So Doku's created the space for Cherki to receive the pass here. Cherki into Diaz, and once again look at the distances between Diaz and any other Sunderland player. There's no one really near him. By the time that Diaz receives the ball, and now he's in a pretty decent shooting area, there's no Sunderland player near him. The longer the ball is able to travel, the more likely it's going to take a fortunate deflection, and that's ultimately what ends up happening. He takes a shot here and there is no Sunderland player really near him. This is the first time we've scored directly from a corner this season, by which I mean the corner taker actually gets the assist. I may well do a standalone analysis video on this, but in sum, City only really have 2 actual corner threats, and that is Guardiola and Nico O'Reilly. We should have scored a lot more corners this season because there's not really been a problem with the delivery, but attacking the ball has been an issue for City this season. What we see from this corner setup is that instead of Haaland and Diaz trying to run onto this and it not being much of a structured attack, all they are really tasked with is occupying players and being dummies for Guardiola's run. He's able to rise highest and meet it highest also. So perhaps there will be a standalone analysis video to come on that. Before I get into Cherki and how wonderful his man of the match performance was, the first half ended 2-0. Lovely situation. But we had a 2-goal lead against Fulham, and we had a 2-goal lead against Leeds, and we've had a number of leads in the first half, and then we've been worse in the second half. And I've argued that the main reason for that is because teams come on to us more in the second half. They expose more so our build-up weaknesses, and then we're not really able to sustain possession or control in the match. And I was concerned that second half Sunderland were going to do exactly that to us, because if we have a look at all of their matches from the quote Big Six this season in the Premier League, pay particular attention to the PPDA, the passes per defensive action. Essentially, the lower that number is, generally speaking, the more intense your press is. So we're going to compare the first half versus the second half of Sunderland against all their Big Six opponents this season. So against United, 3 in the first half, goes down to 2.4 in the second half, a more intense second half from Sunderland. Against Chelsea, 9.12 in the first half, down to 7.3 in the second half, a more intense press from Sunderland. Against Arsenal, 6.64 in the first half, 4.76 in the second half, a more intense press. Finally, Liverpool, 8.36 first half, 6.16 second half. Say it with me, a more intense press. But the reverse happened against City, and this is the first time it's happened for Sunderland against Big Six opponents this season. 6.43 in the first half, increased up to 7. This isn't a perfect stat, and it may well just be that City were able to keep more of the ball, therefore Sunderland couldn't get close to them. But I do wonder how much of that is informed by the fact that Sunderland were perhaps fatigued from the game at Anfield. They played one day after us as well. They also have their derby match coming up against Newcastle next week. So maybe they didn't want to commit so much energy. Perhaps they couldn't commit so much energy to that second half. But either way, for the most part in that second half, Sunderland didn't really press us. They didn't really cause us that much of a problem. Let's get into Cherki in the second half. And I actually felt that even though he had a good first half, Cherki, I preferred him more so in the second half. He was everywhere. He was doing everything. So this is just a ball. It comes off, fortunately, against Haaland. But Cherki's just in the right place at the right time to recover the ball, recover the loose ball, get City on their way. And this actually leads to a chance where Doku perhaps could have scored. Cherki got 2 assists in this game. He could have well had 3, 4, 5 in the match, and maybe even a goal for himself. All over the pitch. This is not the player who was shackled to just the right half space, which of course is the main area you want him in, and indeed that's where the highest volume of his touches was. But against a low block side like Sunderland, it was that spontaneity that I spoke about earlier. You do want to give Cherki central freedom. Of course, he can sometimes pop up on the right, but you do want him to be always asking questions of the opponent from both sides centrally. It was also fantastic defensively. 6 ball recoveries for him, and his offensive actions were absolutely insane as well. 10 progressive carries, 6 key passes, 9 progressive passes, and it could have all gone very badly wrong for City at the start of that second half. I don't really know what Diaz is doing here. This is obviously a mistake by him. It's a shame because he had a really good defensive game. This is a moment of madness. This is fantastic by Donnarumma. This is such a crucial save because if this goes in, look at O'Reilly, hands on his head. If that goes in at 2-1, oh no, here we go again. Sunderland back into the match. Away fans spring back into life. This is the last thing he wants to do. So Donnarumma deserves massive credit for that save. Cherki also deserves a lot of credit because there was a possibility that the game goes away from City here. Sunderland, in fact, I think like just after this action, they hit the post. They could have scored, but for a great Donnarumma save. The last thing you want to do is give them any sort of impetus in the match. You need to kill the game, you need to control it, slow it down, make sure you don't lose the ball. So Bernardo does well to win it back. In fact, he technically wins a foul. City want to advance it up the pitch, though they don't want to give Sunderland a chance to press them in the corner. Doku makes his opponent go on the floor. That's really funny. And it just comes to Cherki here, and every action here from Cherki is just perfect and wonderful. It's the opposite of what we saw in that Fulham match, where so many City players just wanted to play it forward quickly. It's not measured, and it's not simple. We need to calm it down. Cherki came on against Fulham, and for the most part, we saw a far more measured City. for the most part in this match. The reason why it was a far more measured City was because we had Cherki in the side, and this isn't a diss, as opposed to Reinders. Cherki's just got that string to his bow more so than Reinders has. Cherki's far more like Foden in that sense, where he's learnt/knows how to slow the play down and is a tempo controller in that sense. Lovely bit of work with Cherki and Foden. They trust one another. We know that these players love playing with one another. Foden brings it forward. Cherki's still in support, and Foden trusts Cherki, and Cherki trusts that Foden's able to play this lovely pass to him, and indeed he does, and City just recycled the ball. From a moment where, like a minute ago, Sunderland had just hit the post, and it's an incredibly nervous time for City. This is what you need. This is such an understated element of football, and of course people are rightly going to talk about the wonderful dribbling, the fantastic Rabona assist, and I'll be talking about that as well. This is so crucial, and this is worth its weight in gold. Why we lost control against Fulham, why we didn't lose control against Sunderland, I don't think that can be understated. Another moment here, another Sunderland corner, another potential chance where a City player plays it too quickly or incorrectly or with too much velocity. Cherki, lovely little dink into Doku. City get running. It's a lovely time had by all. This is why you want Cherki to not be playing out and out right wing. Bernardo here is holding the width for him. This allows Cherki to attack that half space, make the run in behind. This is comical. Like just the way he accelerates past this Sunderland defender, literally pops this one on the floor. Beautiful little chip into Haaland, who just absolutely has to score, and that would probably have killed the game. This is the goal which ultimately killed the game. This is the third goal. This is the ridiculous Rabona assist from Cherki. Cherki's actually the widest player here. It's worth noting he can still operate as the widest player, so long as there is momentum occurring. You don't really want him to be a Doku type of touchline winger, even though he is capable of going to the right and still thriving in those moments. Of course, the Rabona assist is like gorgeous, and there's not really too much to analyse about that. It's just insane. I don't think I've ever seen a Rabona assist live. In fact, can you guys remember, have City ever had a Rabona assist at the Etihad? If they have, I can't remember it. Let me know in the comments section. So I'm not actually going to focus too much on the Rabona assist because that speaks for itself. I'm going to actually cover more so the movement of Bernardo and Foden. So of course, Cherki does wonderfully well, gets into a great position here. But the runs here are really clever. So Sunderland are actually had committed a number of bodies forward, so they don't have everyone back. So they're really eager just to get back and get everyone defending here. Bernardo's run is fantastic because it's stretching the opponents backwards. But Foden's positioning here and Foden's movement is also really clever because he's moving forwards, he's moving backwards, he's not committing one way or another. He's asking a question of Sunderland's defenders. So it means that and he looks over his shoulder just to see how much space he has. So it means that by the time this ridiculous ball comes in by Cherki, look at how much space that Foden has, despite the fact that Sunderland players had a number of seconds to get back and mark him. But because of the movement, Foden now all of a sudden finds himself isolated, surrounded by 3 Sunderland players, but they're too far away from him for it to matter. And I'm sorry, but that is like, I don't want to be too extreme. I mean, maybe it's just like the Rabona assist has got me feisty, I'm not sure. But this whole pattern, and it's not really represented that well in stills, more so the video. This is Frank Lampard's level of movement, or an Ilkay Gundogan level of movement. And of course, the finish is great. And it just reinforces the idea that Foden can have a deeper role, Cherki can have the more advanced role, and Foden can still be an offensive, box-crashing threat. He was everywhere. He was essentially given full freedom. It was wonderful to see. That's what you want against a low-block side like Sunderland. You sometimes just want to create some chaos through spontaneity. Top threat-creating players by a fair margin. Best progressor of the ball also, he and Doku. Guardiola's comments after the match were interesting. He basically tried to downplay the Rabona assist, and he made some comments about how perhaps Cherki still needs to work a little bit harder in some areas of his game. He's maybe used to being the best player in a side and everything going through him. That's not necessarily how it's going to be at City. So some of these clips are more of a fair critique of Cherki and maybe getting at what Pep is alluding to. But of course, it was still wonderful by Cherki. Let that be known. So Marmoush is on the pitch right now. This is a great ball by Cherki. Once again, he's actually technically a right winger here. He can still operate there. It's not necessarily a problem. Of course, he still wants to give him central access. I don't know whether Marmoush dummies this because he's received a shout, but or because he knows he's not really going to get a good enough contact on it. This is really clever, though, by Marmoush to know that Reinders is behind him and is in a better position. So that's really clever by Marmoush. Unfortunately, Reinders does not make the pass from Cherki count, and he hits it wide. Should really be scoring there. It is 3-0. There's only 15 minutes left. Cherki's been wonderful. He should have had like 6 assists or something by this point. One could argue that he's allowed to be greedy at this stage. It's not like it's 0-0 or you're chasing the game or you're losing. But maybe this is the next level decision making that Pep does want from him. So I think it is worth exploring, because realistically, Cherki should be playing Marmoush in here at some point. He's onside there, he's onside here. This is a great opportunity to play him in there. There's only one thing on his mind at this point, though. It's to take the shot, and it is a really good save. And if it goes in, you say it's not an error, it's not a mistake to do that, but it was still the lower probability decision to do that. Perhaps that's one of the things that Pep is alluding to. People have been criticising Marmoush for this, saying that he wasn't onside. But he was onside for a fair bit here. Cherki's got the ball, and at this point, Marmoush is even in his own half. He can play it to him there. He can play it to him here. He's still onside. He's offside here. Doku's actually also onside, and instead he opts to just go backwards. Not necessarily a mistake. A foul is drawn. It slows down the game. There's only 10 minutes left. But Marmoush was very angry. He did like that with his hands. He was very upset. He did want the ball. And it would have been nice to have slipped in Marmoush on one of those 2 occasions, because Marmoush is potentially low on confidence. He needs a league goal. Hasn't scored in the Premier League yet. Limited on minutes. Limited on opportunities. Maybe that is what Pep was referring to when he was essentially saying, I want even more from Cherki. But regardless, it was a man of the match performance from this man. Absolutely glorious. And it's no surprise that he's able to take apart this Sunderland low block in the manner that he was able to do so. He has so many weapons in his arsenal. He's such a beautiful player to watch. He's so exciting. Of course, we'll never be able to replace Kevin De Bruyne directly, but Cherki's doing a pretty damn good job of replacing his passing creativity to that fullest extent. And guess what? He's 22 years old. The best is surely yet to come. Make sure you leave a like on the video before you leave, and shout out to my highest tier supporters across Patreon and the YouTube membership: Tony, Spartacus, Silver Splits the Blue, Ethan Larios, Austin King, Rowan, and Yusuf.